first off, let's start with you and your background, your family, etc. Morehouse and everything like that.
Sure. Well, thank you. And again, thank you for inviting me. I'm just quite impressed with what you've been building here at S4. It is exciting to see where you all are going. And I do, frankly, look forward to ways that we can continue to partner. Some of the pandemic has brought forward a realization for many folks. I mean, we live in the world of digital environments, but the importance of the communication of who we are as people through the construct of a digital infrastructure. And obviously, you all play a critical role there. And I think that we're going to find ever increasing and expanding opportunities to work together. So I'm excited about that. But why we are here today, I mean, it's been interesting. And Martin, you and I have known each other for a number of years. And we've seen this world change in so many ways. And when I harken back to a time where I grew up in essence in a segregated neighborhood. I mean, there was one Japanese family that lived in our neighborhood. Then the rest were African American. And like all things, when you're growing up, you view your world as everything that you know. And I was very happy, and both my parents were teachers. And I lived in what I call I'll call it a beloved community. It was a community that supported each other. I saw my parents very much a part of the fabric of that community. My father, who was one of the civic leaders, he helped form civic associations to ensure that our communities got their fair share of resources. I'm sure it wasn't their fair share, but get some share of resources. For everything from plowing the snow to making sure we had voting booths that were in the school and communities that people could actually get to. And, he was one of the proponents of getting Head Start programs for, pre-K education and ensuring that there were, proper nutrition and chairman of the YMCA to see that, African-American kids had an opportunity to participate in outdoor activities, which is very much a part of, my daily life today. And my mother, again, a school teacher who I saw, write a $25 check to the United Negro College Fund every month, even though I think she made, $14,000 a year as a teacher, and then worked in the summers, managing the playgrounds, et cetera. I grew up in a community where you saw, when we would come home from school, I was one of the first kids to actually go in, part of a busing program for what they called, forced desegregation of the school system. And, immediately when they announced this, the school system bought a number of buses to transport kids across the city. And some racists decided to attempt to burn all the buses, burned like a third of them. And so rather than the buses that were supposed to come to our neighborhood, only one came. And I just so happened to be in that, the 3-block radius where that one bus was scheduled to come pick us up. So rather than all the kids in my neighborhood going to call it desegregated schools or to a better school with better resources, only the kids on that one bus were. And it was amazing to me when I look back on this now and look at the progress of the kids who got on that bus versus who kids outside the neighborhood and outside of that one bus. Sure, there were a number who did well outside of, but the vast number of those who got on that one bus went to Ivy League schools. And this is you think about it, K through 6th grade, right? Went to Ivy League schools, became engineers, became politicians, lawyers, doctors, et cetera. That kind of points to the importance of fundamental education for all children and the resourcing of it. And those are the things that I think about in growing up, that part of what my duty, and we'll get to this later in the conversation, I'm sure, part of my duty is to ensure that, we provide more on-ramps to opportunity, and it's at its, base level is on-ramp to, a good fundamental education. That's one of the most fundamental rights that every, child should have access to.
So a couple of questions from that. I mean, in my case, my father probably was more influential on me and my mother. Is that the same with you, or are they equally influential? And then the other thing is, you mentioned that terrible situation around the buses and the burning of the buses, which must have been, I think back in my past when things nothing as significant as that, but was that a spur? And if so, were there other incidents that have spurred you forward?
But when you grow up as an African American, you have these incidents all the time. And I hate to overstate it, but in some cases it can't be overstated. The level of fear that communities and people live in, that has been propagated for, generations. You think about, 250 years of slavery, 60 years of Jim Crow, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal. I mean, and then, you see the police state that has become commonplace in certain communities. Martin, I remember, just give an example. I'm 8, 9, 10 years old. And to answer your first question, I had, influences from both parents, which was a beautiful thing. I had influences from the community, which was a beautiful thing. You couldn't walk to the store without people kind of keeping an eye and having a conversation. So you felt like, again, I use the word beloved community. You were a child of that community, not just a child of your parents. And that is something that was very unique in the community, the African-American community. People looked to take care of the children of the community. And so if one had resources, they tried to ensure that everybody in that community had those resources. But I remember when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old and earned some money. I used to shovel snow and cut grass, all that sort of stuff, earned some money. And my dad and mom went half on me on a bike. I bought a new Schwinn bicycle. And, and I was with my friends and we were riding in the park. We lived across the street from the city park, and the police stopped us to check the serial numbers on our bikes. And that happened a few times over, when we ride our bike. And we're seeing all these, white kids and driving. Nobody's stopping them to check the serial numbers on their bikes. No 8-year-old should have to, know the serial number on their bicycle. Those are the sorts of things that create a mindset that is, it can be destructive or it can be empowering. And, for me and a number of my friends, we grew up, we said, these are things that have to change. Seeing my uncle who, beautiful man, graduated, got his master's degree from Colorado State University, was about to get married and got a job with the state to go inspect, state facilities. And he actually was going, he was out in Colorado, went to a gas station because he was at work, refilled his car because he was down inspecting one of the facilities in the town outside of Denver. And the gas station attendant shot and killed him because he said, I didn't believe that an African-American would have a state credit card, so it must be stolen. I'm, I think, 11 at that time. I mean, that's the state that you grow up in. So it's not one incident. I say it is a whole series of things that affect the psyche of African-Americans in the country. And, I see it in other parts of the country, but it has been a pervasive thing. And so when I see, the killing of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, it is all in a series of the same sort of things that need to change and the systemic constructs that exist out there are the things that need to change. And that's part of what we all have to do as leaders, as business leaders, as politicians, and frankly, as looking at being decent human beings on this planet, is to ensure that those sort of activities don't continue to occur without accountability, retribution. But frankly, what we need to do is to eliminate that systemic racism. We need to end racism. That's what we need to do.
Okay, just on yesterday's events and the guilty decision by the jury on all 3 counts, which probably ends up with Chauvin going to jail for at least 40 years. How important is that decision in your mind? I mean, when you look at the commentary, at one end, I saw one person saying, "Well, George Floyd is still dead. I mean, you can't bring him back," and that applies to your relation who was shot in a gas station too.
Right.
At the other end, people are saying this is, the president is saying, this is a historic decision and will make a significant difference. What do you think?
MLK, says, until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. That is an event, the guilty verdict, And then the next day we wake up and we have one of our children shot by the police officers in Columbus, Ohio. It is an important drop in that stream. But what we have to do is redirect the waters. Mm-hmm. And that's what we all have to do. We have to show it is wrong to assault members of a community based on their skin color. It's just wrong. And we have to do the things that we can do, which is a lot. And we have to devote our energy and our resources and our capacity to solve those problems. You know, Martin, you and I have unique advantage in access to people who are structuring, solutions and different, could be IT solutions, tech, whatever it is. And part of what you and I have to do is have those conversations about how do you use those resources properly to really address the stakeholders, not just the shareholders, but the stakeholders. So that's why I've been, excited to see some of the statements and the actions from World Economic Forum or Business Roundtable. You can say we need to think about stakeholder capitalism, because I do believe capitalism is a big part of the solution. The enablement of the individuals and the liberation of ideas and utilizing capital to reshape and form the way we live and engage with each other, and to make a better life for many people on the planet in terms of health and welfare, education. So I believe it's the right construct. We just have to get more of the folks who are the stewards of those entities to be more thoughtful about using their capacity to make the changes.
Yeah, I just on that point about stakeholder capitalism, which I think started with Klaus Schwab, was before he wrote his Fourth Industrial Revolution book. So it's many years ago. I think we overcomplicate it. My view is that if you're in business for the long term, you'll do everything right by your stakeholders.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think we do overcomplicate on the one hand, but we actually have to open up the lenses for people who don't really understand the stakeholders involved. There is in some cases, for many years it was okay. And Klaus, I think, wrote his first piece in '73 about this, which you think about how brilliant that was, to think about, you have to create sustainable businesses. And sustainable business doesn't mean, I only think about it when it enters my supply chain. But what happened to get materials into your supply chain, and is that sustainable, or did it truly destroy land, communities, infrastructure? And then once it gets used up, they're moving on to somewhere else. And once that gets used up, you try to find some substitute product, as opposed to thinking about more holistically. And so, part of it is, opening the aperture of understanding of what holistic approach to what is an ecosystem that fuels your business. That's an important part. The other part of that, which is as important, not just in preserving what I'll call the planet that we live on, being more gentle to it, is open up the aperture to inclusion of people, a conscious inclusion. Everybody grew up in a neighborhood, and your neighborhood may have had certain types of people in that, and then you kind of grow up with that framing. And in many cases, unless you seek to go get educated somewhere else or work somewhere else, you might just live in that one bubble all of your life. And a lot of people on the planet live that way. And so they will develop conscious biases as human beings based on what they know. And part of what we do, for instance, at Vista, we have a program called conscious inclusion. Conscious inclusion. Think about it. If you grew up in America in a all-white suburban neighborhood, went to a college, it's 93% white, then went to a tech company, which in most Silicon Valley and places is 98% white. How will you know how to engage with somebody who went to Morehouse or who went to Howard or Georgia Tech or an African American who came through one of those systems? You may not know how to engage with them, so you might have a conscious, bias or unconscious bias, as opposed to figuring out a conscious inclusion, way to engage with them. Well, that's all education and training. So part of what our job to do as corporate leaders is to say, how do I drive conscious inclusion dynamics into every single company that I touch or I engage with, as opposed to standing back and saying, oh, it just makes sense, right? Well, what makes sense is to create a more inclusive economy in your companies, the economy of your company, because that's going to help you be a more effective, business to address the economy of the planet, which is very diverse.
Yeah.
Right. So, we as leaders have to recognize that there are structures in America. The structures started with, you go from, people being enslaved to, Jim Crow to, you move it forward, and all of a sudden you've got, redlining, which, some of your foreign audiences may not be aware of, which is they're saying certain neighborhoods, we're not going to either underwrite as a bank for mortgages or to give, insurance support. And so the value of those houses don't go up. And if the value of the houses don't go up, then people can't take that money to educate their children, et cetera. Well, then all of a sudden people are trapped and they don't get a chance to have any mobility or meet other people from other environments. Me growing up at a time when desegregation was occurring and forced busing, I played in the band with people from, different ethnicities and cultural backgrounds. I played, sports with them. And a lot of that doesn't happen as much anymore because people have kind of withdrawn back into their own enclaves, which we now have to consciously change in the corporation environment. Sure, there's in some cases not a whole lot we can do K through 12 education. We can work on our policyholders and all, but when they come to us in our companies, they may have those biases already. Part of our job is to educate them and give them, opportunities to become more consciously aware of what exclusionary practices have led to for many people, and ensure that they embrace people with different backgrounds and constructs to become a part of the fabric of our ecosystem of our businesses.